drive. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's been a long time since we've put a video up, and it's definitely been a while since we've put any kind of content out about a vehicle that we've been working on. This is a 1965 Mustang Fastback that's owned by a good friend of mine. You guys should know him by Capone. Capone was that 1970 C10 that we built about 4 or 5 years ago. It had the 1,000 horsepower Wegner motor in it. It was in CK Truck Magazine, and he owns a bunch of different vehicles and bought this one at Barrett-Jackson last year. This car has been through a couple different shops during its build process, and what we think is that it's a project that took about 6 or 7 years, and it's a very high-end project. It was a really high-end shop that built it initially, great paint and body work, and then maybe some of the final assembly stuff was another shop that maybe hurried right at the end. So Shane bought it, and he bought it with only 16 miles on it. So if any of you guys have ever built a project vehicle before, you know that 16 miles is definitely not enough to shake down a vehicle. So Shane, having the experiences that he has, knew I gotta send it somewhere to make sure that this car is shaken out, all the bugs worked out of it, and while we're at it, maybe change a couple little things in the middle of doing the shakedown process. So our to-do list was pretty simple. Let's do some LED lighting, and it had a Quaife 6-speed sequential transmission in it, which was a little more hardcore than what Shane wanted. Shane may do a track day here and there, but he mainly wants to drive it around Arizona and enjoy the car on the streets too. So we pulled that Quaife sequential and we put a Bowler Carbon Edition T56 Magnum in it with a ZR1 2.26 gear set in it. So now it's got a pretty close ratio, 6-speed, that you can, a normal H pattern shifter, clutch it between every gear, more of a street transmission that he can do some track days with as well. What really happened was the entire tunnel had to get cut out. We refabricated the tunnel area. That required us to re-Raptor line the bottom of the car, repaint the whole interior of the car, and then we pulled out a bunch of traditional like autometer gauges and put in a Motec C1212 dash. And then we got into some really techie stuff that you know guys that I love, and that was making the Holley Dominator communicate on CAN network with the Motec. And our good friend Ed that does all of our Motec calibration stepped in. He wrote all the CAN addressing and got all that stuff to work. And then actually him and my buddy Taz now are working together to do a real cool display creator. They're using that software through Motec to be able to draw and make a really cool set of custom gauges that we'll load into that later. But in the meantime, let's walk around this car and I'll show you some of the other cool stuff and the cool features about it. All right, so I'm gonna pop the hood, and under the hood you're gonna see that it's got not a Ford motor. Some of you guys are gonna hate that. The rest of you guys are gonna love it. It's got a masked Black Label 427 LS motor with Harrop ITBs with their carbon fiber plenums that go over it, and they're plumbed into the fender wells. The original shop built some really neat inner fenders that go over and protect the air filters. It's got a CNR radiator. It's got a lot of custom breather tanks, reservoirs. So the engine bay side is pretty cool. Probably makes about 700 horsepower. We didn't get the opportunity to put it on a dyno, but that might happen in the future. One of the things that it didn't have when it came here was turn signals. So Dylan and I put these little indicators in here that are pretty trick. These are actually from a company that sells bar ends for ruckuses. So we bought some signals for a ruckus, and Dylan made some pretty trick brackets, and then I wired them up. So now the car's got signals, it's got a horn, which it never had. These are the horn. So on the inside of this one, you can see that's the tunnel that Dylan fabricated for me. So a really trick transmission tunnel. And one of my favorite features on the inside of this car now is a remote exposed shifter. This is something that's totally unique and not commonplace with any Tremec transmissions. Most of the time the shifter is direct mounted to on top of the transmission, or if it was a TR6060, then it was remote mounted off of the back of the transmission. In this case, this is an S1 sequential, non-sequential H pattern shifter that Dylan mounted to the floor. All the floor is reinforced with 1/8 inch plate, and then we made our own rods that connected to the transmission. But this is a Magnum, so we had to take the tail housing off the transmission, mill the tail housing down so that the rod would clear, and it hooks to a TR6060 top mount remote shifter deal. So it's pretty trick. very close in its pattern. But anyways, Dylan did a fantastic job on the tunnel. It couldn't have came out any cooler. Dylan put in this really neat push button start system that actually has a proximity fob too. This proximity fob, you know, obviously you can set it to automatic where within 10 feet of the car it'll automatically detect it and it'll turn the push button on. Or you can just hit unlock and you can see that it powers up the push button. And then once you depress the pedal, it knows and it's ready to fire the car. So that's turned out to be a pretty sweet feature. And then you can see the Motec C1212 dash. A couple really neat things that we did here to make this a little unique. One was that it's floating. It's not mounted into the dash itself. We fabricated a bracket that actually houses not only the C1212, but the headlight switch now is on here, and then the curly cord with all the steering wheel function. Its Canon connector is attached to the column now too. So all of that was TIG welded to the housing of the column. Pulled the column all apart, painted everything black, and then while we were at it, we knew that having this floating, you know, there might be an issue of sun reflecting or glaring off of the screen. So Peter actually designed this in software, and then we had it 3D printed, and then I sanded it and painted it black to match. So these are pretty cool. We actually went ahead and printed a few of these, so if you guys have a C1212, we've got a sunshade for you on our website. This car already had floor mount pedals, which is awesome. It also didn't have high beams, so I wired one of these auto switches to a relay, and so the dimming feature is on the steering wheel. This cycles through the different pages on the screen, and you can actually see that we put a rear mounted camera from Race Grade in the car as well, so you can look behind you when you back up, or if you're on track, you can see who's come up behind you. So that's it. This resets the warnings, and this is the horn. So on the back of the car, one of the things that I'm most proud about is this fuel filler that we made. Peter designed this all in CAD. He 3D printed a mock-up part, and we made sure that it fit perfect. And then we sent the design to our friends at Z-Rods, and they went ahead and machined us not only the housing, but the cap itself out of billet. And then if you notice, the housing is brushed, so we brushed it and had it clear anodized to match the lips of the wheel. And then the cap itself is Cerakote to match the center of the wheels. So the aesthetic matches it perfect. We ran a main battery ground all the way to the engine block and then properly grounded the chassis. So now it cranks much better, especially hot. Another thing we did was added circuit protection. You can see a 200 amp main breaker now, so that these long cables that run inside the body are now circuit protected. And then it's got one of our big Group 35 batteries that we keep in stock from Anti-Gravity. And then Dylan just whipped up a quick hold down out of 1/8 inch plate, and then we powder coated that. So a couple little things made a huge difference in the back of this car. Being as though they wanted to do so much track day stuff with this, all the suspension, brakes, and chassis stuff is like over the top. All stuff that we would have picked. You guys have seen us use Cortex Racing in the past. This was actually built right alongside of Cortex Racing in the same building. So it's got a giant cage. It's all tied into the unibody. Comes all the way out into the engine bay. It's got all Cortex's SLA front end. So it's got Penske remote reservoir, double adjustable coilovers all the way around it. It's got a Watts link and a torque arm from Cortex, and it's got a cambered floater 9-inch in it. Big stop tech brakes. I mean, the chassis is set up. So I'm pretty pumped to show you guys a little drive around here in a little bit. Another thing that will aid in how this car handles and drives is the weight. They did fiberglass fenders, the whole front bumper's fiberglass, the hood's fiberglass. If you notice on the doors, there's no window frame anymore, and there's actually no window regulators and no door glass. What they did is they built an aluminum frame for the polycarbonate windows. So that should save a lot of weight, and then there's no quarter glass either. They did aluminum panels and riveted them into the quarter panels. So really the car's pretty lightweight. We haven't scaled it yet. We're gonna scale it for Shane before it heads out, but power to weight on this thing should feel pretty awesome too. All right, we're gonna fire it up. So this thing has individual throttles with no idle air control valve. So If you're familiar with that, what you'll have to do is when you fire it, you'll have to keep it running with the throttle. And then once the engine and the throttles get temperature in them, it'll grow enough to where it can stay at idle itself. But so it's idling at like 1,000 now. It's a difference of about 300 RPM between cold and hot. So when the motor gets heat in it and the throttles get heat in it, it'll idle about 1,300, which with this 8.5-inch twin disc, it makes it better in my opinion. You can take off from a light or a stop sign way easier. So it sounds good. Ready? Okay, well that wraps up this video. I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you subscribing to the channel, liking and commenting. All that stuff is much appreciated. I hope that you enjoyed some car content. This is a special car for a really special customer. We love this car and I hope you enjoyed this video. So I appreciate you. We'll see you on the next one.